Welcome to Becoming Limitless. This is the podcast for entrepreneurs who want to optimize their life for freedom. I'm going to teach you how to upgrade your health, money, and mindset so you can have more energy, time freedom, and financial independence. I'm your host, Tanessa Shears. Let's jump in. Welcome back to the Becoming Limitless podcast, and maybe more important, welcome back to the Courage to Lead series. I'm actually really excited to bring you this series over last week and this week. It's a workshop series that's actually from inside of my Becoming Limitless program, which is kind of fun because these workshops are normally exclusive to the entrepreneurs inside my coaching program. But I want to give you a glimpse of what it's like to dive deep into the tools and strategies that really can help you learn to lead yourself powerfully. So the episode this week is going to be part 2. And if you missed the first episode, which is the last episode, episode 148 on the podcast, you're definitely going to want to go back and listen to that one first, because in part 1, we talked about self-leadership and what it means to guide yourself through the tough moments. You know, those moments where you have like a dip in energy, or you're struggling with your motivation or your confidence, or you're having doubt in yourself and you don't know if you could do it. Yeah, you're going to want to listen to that episode, because one of the biggest takeaways was understanding this concept I talk about of circumstances. Circumstances are the neutral facts of any situation. Things like your bedtime, your workload, what someone said to you. These things are the things that we think cause our feelings and our thoughts and cause all the problems in our life, but they don't, right? These things on their own don't create your feelings or results. It's your thoughts about them that do. So if that is new to you, definitely go back and listen to that. And that leads right into what we're going to be talking about today in this episode that I entitled Creating Results. So we're going to break down why emotions play a much bigger role in your actions than you might actually think. We're also going to be talking about the mistakes people make when we try to force a result to happen, even though underneath we don't really feel like aligned with it, or we feel like everything feels awkward or a struggle, right? And of course, I'm going to be teaching you how to use a simple but very powerful tool called the model to finally get unstuck. So if you've ever felt like you're spinning your wheels, not seeing progress, you're frustrated, this episode is going to change the way you approach achieving anything, whether that be in your health, your business, or your life. I'm so excited to bring you the second episode in this series of The Courage to Lead. Let's jump in. All right. So last week we talked about the courage to lead. Specifically, we were talking a lot about self-leadership last week. We did a dive into the first 2 components of the model that we were going through. And that first part was being the circumstances, the subject of our thinking, the facts of the situation is our circumstances. We then talked about our thoughts about them, which are literally just sentences we have about subjects in our head. And we started to see how much self-leadership is being able to take that moment and bring to your awareness, oh, these are the sentences I'm having right now. And so those, I think, are really powerful pieces. Today, we're going to be covering the last 3 components of that model, which will show you how your brain then, as a byproduct, creates a lot of the results we are experiencing. And I think it's so cool when you could trace that and be like, oh, no, well, no wonder I'm doing this. Look what I'm thinking. And I watch the chain as it goes through. So we're going to jump into the third part of the model. We have circumstances, thoughts, feelings. That is the third part of it. Now, I like to think of a feeling literally as just a vibration that's happening in my body. And all it is it's a response to my thinking. Like, I'm just going to keep it really simple like that. Another really interesting reframe that I take often on emotions are that emotions are neutral. So if I could ask you to name me 5 bad emotions, 5 good emotions, you'd be like, cool, this. But I always like to think of emotions as neutral and ask myself, like, when did you learn that feeling sad was bad? When did you learn that feeling happy was good? Instead of having it just be an experience. And I always like to think of, like, I know we are more evolved than animals, but do you think a deer is like, oh, this is bad, I should feel bad about feeling this bad feeling? No, it just experiences it as an emotion it goes through, right? And there's many times actually that negative emotions can be quite helpful, right? Disappointment sometimes can feel really bad, but it can also create a lot of growth and change and willing to do something about it, right? Grief is something like, there are sometimes you want to feel bad emotions. Do you want to feel happy if you're mourning a loss? Maybe, but grief is also there for a reason, right? And that discomfort can sometimes get you in motion. So negative emotions aren't always bad. And I think in the same time, like positive emotions aren't always good because sometimes they can breed contentment or lack of action or just like you're not moving towards your goals because things are good enough, right? So I like to think of emotions as neutral and watch when my brain is saying, I shouldn't be feeling this. I don't want to be feeling this. This is a bad feeling. I shouldn't have this. So when you feel an emotion, there are two responses to it. You can resist it or you can allow it. And resisting is a lot of the times how we're taught to deal with our emotions. And it shows up a kind of three different ways. One, you're either suppressing it, like, no, I can't feel this right now. I've got work to do. No, I can't feel this right now. There's people over. No, I can't. I shouldn't be. I can't. I put it in a box. Suppressing, repressing. Suppressing is when you're doing it consciously. Repressing is when you're doing it unconsciously. The second way is expressing. We all know people that have emotions and they like to blow up on other people and it negatively impacts their emotional state. Like that's a way of dealing with an emotion. It's expressing. The third way is to distract. You feel stressed out, you scroll your phone. You feel bored, you eat. We feel insecure, we overwork, right? These are all different ways to distract from a feeling and emotion. So I identify, I suppress. I didn't realize I did it until it was pointed out this way. But I was like, oh, interesting. So it's cool to see if you really are like, this is your topic you need to dive into. There is a book by David Hawkins called Letting Go that really explains how to start processing emotions. And it's really good. So those are resist, but the other option is to allow an emotion. And we've talked about this briefly on other calls, but allowing emotion is like, if I'm feeling doubt, instead of, I can't feel this right now, I don't have time for this, it's inconvenient, or expressing it or distracting from it, I just allow myself to feel doubt and what that feels like as a physical set of sensations in my body. And I allow it to sit there and let it be without fighting it, just letting go. This is the whole premise of this book. It's really good. And I find that when you resist a feeling, it makes it bigger. It's like you get the pressure cooker going on it, right? And it builds, it builds, it builds. So letting go is a sense of releasing attachment to the meaning of the feeling, what you're making it mean, what you think other people will make it, whether you should be feeling it, shouldn't, it's a bad feeling, it's good feeling. When I was going through the worst of my anxiety, one of the things that, I heard that helped me was when I wake up, you know, those days where you're spinning the second you wake up, and you're just like, you can feel your whole nervous system got set off into fight or flight. And then you're just carrying it throughout the day. I almost picture anxiety as like a big, like a shoulder bag. I'm just like, okay, we're just going to carry this. It's like, it's fine. I'm just carrying the bag today. Just a big, heavy, awkward bag that I'm carrying around. It's fine. I can still do things. And so really releasing the attachment to the fact that it shouldn't be there, should be there has been really helpful. Now, when we talk about feelings specifically related to our health, and obviously a lot of these apply to all areas of our life, some feelings that pop up, I know we've been giving examples in each category. So we have fear, stress, overwhelm, guilt, shame, joy, anger, willingness, apathy, openness, content, calm, powerful, understanding, curious, determined, focused, readiness, frustrated, and open. And it's really interesting. Until I learned this model, I thought that circumstances caused my feelings. I thought that my friend showing up late made me frustrated. I thought that somebody sending me a mean message on Instagram made me feel insecure. And I used to always think that thing, that person, all of that made my feelings happen. But when I started seeing like, oh, those things are neutral, I had a sentence about them that created this feeling. Ooh, if I know that I can control my brain, or if that's something I'm willing to work on, you get all your power back on there because circumstances can't cause your feelings. Other people can't, your business can't, your kids can't, your partner can't. And when I was fully able to grasp that, I was like, that's a really cool level of responsibility because I can directly influence that. So that is feelings. So we're going to call that like the F line in the model. So now we go down to the next line. So when you have all these feelings, they drive you into some form of action. Now, there are three different types of actions. There are actions you do, like I'm going to work out. That is an action you do. There are inactions, avoiding. I want to work out, but I stayed in bed and scrolled on my phone. That's an inaction, right? It's also an action, actually, but an inaction is maybe just I'm not working out. Maybe I get up and go on with my day. I just skip the workout. And then there's also reactions. right? The experience you're having when you are presented with something. So I always like to think like, am I acting? Am I reacting? Or am I just avoiding altogether? So I think it's really important when we're looking at the feeling we have that is creating the actions. I want to get really specific here. So the more specific you can get, the more you start to see how much that feeling is what is causing you to do XYZ, to not do XYZ, to react a certain way. Because if we can start to see that when I feel motivated, I do this. When I feel insecure or when I feel doubt, I do these things. Then we can start to go back up and be like, okay, well, if doubt is the problem, what are the thoughts that are causing doubt? And you can really start to see how this whole model begins to trickle down. And so the cool thing, like I said, is that all of the actions or inactions we're doing, all they do is reveal our thinking. If you follow back up, you can start to see where you're thinking. So a cool kind of exercise is to look at an action or maybe an inaction, something you're not doing, and then be like, okay, what am I feeling about this that's making me not do this? Oh, I'm feeling tired, or I'm feeling anxious. Okay, what are the sentences that are creating anxious? And you seeing your actions really reveals kind of where you're letting your brain spend some of its time. The other really interesting thing about actions is that I would say 99% of people who don't do this work spend their entire life trying to solve in this A line, actions only. So how many times have you had something not work? Business, life, health, whatever. And what did we do? We're like, okay, well, that didn't work. I'll give you an example with business, actually. For the longest time, it was do week-long boot camps. That's the way to get leads. Okay, did that. Okay, well, that didn't work the way I want. Now I'm going to do webinars. Webinars have to be the way that it's done. Okay, now it's like, let's do master classes. Okay, well, that doesn't work. Okay, well, let's do cold DMs. Like, you see how what all I'm doing there is I'm changing what's in the A line, the action, right? Or it's like, I feel tired. And so I tried to go to bed on time and that didn't work. So now I'm just going to try to change the actions. But what we really need to start doing is going back up in our models and recognizing like, okay, why are those actions happening? Right? We're not just trying to change actions, because if we do just change the actions that we're doing and we keep the same thoughts we are thinking, this is how we keep creating the same results. And this can look like inconsistency. I can't stick with it. I don't know why I won't do it. I'm procrastinating, right? It's because we have the same brain, but we're trying to like force change our actions while we still have the old thoughts that are creating our current reality. So it's kind of cool when you get to think about it like that. Another point on actions is that other people's actions, so what they say and what they do, are because of their thoughts, not yours. So what this means is like, we often like to think that if I did this, so they said that. But that's not actually true, because if you think about sitting here, there's nothing that you could do to put a thought in my head to make me feel something, to make me do something. That is my responsibility. And so I love this from a place of, well, what they do is never a result of me, ever. And here's a really cool thing, and this might take a little bit to sink in. You might have to watch this replay again. The only place you can ever show up in someone else's model is as a circumstance. Think about this. Let's say one of you said, let's say, Tanessa, your hair is frizzy today. It's hot. I'm not touching a blow dryer today. Let's say one of you said that. And my old brain would have been like, oh, that's not nice. Like, I feel hurt, right? And think that your sentence caused my hurt, but that's not actually accurate. Your words become my circumstance. It's neutral. I then have a thought that says, that's not nice. Who says stuff like that? That's mean. They don't know my story, blah, blah, blah. And then I start feeling angry, and then my actions change. So do you see that? The only way that someone else can show up in your model is in your circumstance line. And the only way you can show up in their model is their circumstance. Because we often think we can influence other people's thoughts. Like, if I show up like this, or if I do this, then they'll think this about me. But we've already been in situations where it's like, it's my favorite saying, and I've probably said it before. You can be the juiciest peach on the shelf, and some people still don't like peaches. Right? It has nothing to do with the peach. And so once we can start really identifying that, like, oh, It's not because of me that they're doing this or they're feeling this. I am a neutral circumstance. They then have thoughts about what I did or said. And this has helped me so much too, especially with like people on the internet. They always have their own models running that are filtered through their own brains. Most of them think that their circumstances, my post was what caused them to feel angry. My post caused them to feel insecure. It had nothing to do with that. They had a thought about it based on their beliefs, their upbringing, all that stuff that created a feeling in them. Right? And that's what I love. One of the things I love about social media sometimes is you just go through, you'll scroll posts and you watch what the feelings that come up are. Some things trigger you, some things make you feel comparison, and you're noticing in your gut, you're like, oh, I want you to stop and ask, what did I just think about that? Because it's not that person that triggered you. It's that person just showed up as a neutral thing. And we have just old stories. We have programming that just goes on. And once we can start catching it, that's where we get to start doing some work. So actions do not change how we feel. This is the very last point in this action. I really want you to hear this. Actions do not change how you feel. I'm going to grow my business to 500,000 per year. Does not change how you feel. I'm going to start eating great. Will not change how you feel. How do we know that? Because the feeling line comes before the actions. This is where so many of us, we try to change all of the things and the people around us and our life so that we can feel better. It does not work like that. This is why so many people are so unhappy or frustrated with their circumstances, is because they're like, I don't get it. I lost 20 pounds. I'm still insecure. I still feel terrible. I still don't like the way I look in clothes. I still blah, 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 right? It's because the weight never had anything to do with it. It was always their thought about their body. And so we try to change. If I'm going to get my business to this level, this was my relationship, I'm going to have this much saved in the bank account, I'm going to hire this team member. Those things will all make me feel better. And this is why it never does, because the model doesn't run backwards. It runs down. Actions are below feelings. If you want to change how you feel about your life, you need to change your thinking about it, which will change how you feel. And crazy thing is, if you can change the way you feel with your brain, you may not even need to stress out about changing your life. It might just be good the way it is. Maybe the only reason we're making some changes is because we think it's going to change how we feel. And I can tell you that because we got back from 2 months in Panama. Gosh, that was like the epitome of like result achieved. And I went through probably the darkest 3 months I've had since I was dealing with anxiety back in 2015 when I was treated at the hospital. Like, go figure. You wouldn't think a result would have made my whole life magically better. It doesn't do that. Why? It's because my thoughts at the end of that Panama trip were like, who do I want to be now? Like, if I take everything off the plate, who do I want to be? Oh, that just sent me into a tizzy. But it was all created by my brain, every one of it. So really, really, really recognize that changing your life will not change you backwards into the feeling. You have to start at the top down. This is freeing, because how much of our life are we doing just because we think it'll create how we feel instead of actually because we want to do that thing? Okay, right? Okay, common actions I want you to watch for that we do. Write a new to-do list. Make a new plan. Listen to podcasts. Read a book about it. Make excuses. Scroll on our phone. Program hop. Try something new. Don't ask for coaching. Ask for coaching. Quit. Be attached to the outcome. Watch TV, stay up late, overeat, overwork, complain. Do we see this? These are all things that we do or don't do because of how we feel. We need to start identifying that that's where they're coming from. All right, last category in here. Results. Now, your circumstances, you have thoughts about them. When you think this way, you create feelings about them. When you have feelings about them, it causes you to do one of those 3 things: act, inact, or avoid. And your actions create your results. And so if we're literally thinking about results, I want you to think about like this: the results in my life, how much money I have, where I live, who I'm dating, my business success, all of that. Your results are an effect of your thinking. Like, isn't that fun? Your results are an effect of your thinking, your feelings, your actions, and your results. Thinking is always proven correct with the result. And I will get into a little bit more about what that means, but I want to get into a few common results, both good and bad, that you might be creating. So a result might be more time goes by without achieving a goal. A result might be an 85 sleep score. It could be 4 workouts per week. It could be 2 servings of veggies at lunch, 30 grams of protein at breakfast, less time to work on your health, 5 walks per week, meals planned ahead of time. Like those are all examples of results. And you start to look at like, what is the current result that you have with your health? What is the current result? And then from there, you can start to say, now what are the actions I'm taking to create that? What is the feeling it's coming from? What thought is creating those? And you get to start working backwards. Is this making sense so far? Okay, does anybody have any questions? But there's one more thing I do want to cover because I think it's really helpful. Any questions? Anybody want to come off? Just feel free to come off mute if you have questions on that. No. Okay. Okay, so now that you understand the concept of the model, CTFAR. I'm going to call them the T line, the F line, the A line. If you hear me say that, that's what I mean. We're going to talk about types of models now. So the first one is going to be called an unintentional model. So an unintentional model is the model that you are currently running. It is your current programming around your current thinking. It is when you are letting unhelpful thoughts drive how you feel, drive what you do, and create your results. So I imagine, I know even just watching in the group, Cameron, you had thoughts that felt unhelpful when you were out with your friends, right? And those are driving. So that would be considered your unintentional model. It's kind of default programming when you're not really paying attention to what's going on. I'm going to give you an example. Let's say our circumstance is just no sugar, no flour. It's a neutral circumstance. You have a thought, this is too hard to do around family. And you feel frustrated. And what do you do when you feel frustrated? You probably give up on meal planning, grab takeout. It creates resentment. It creates a weird relationship with food where you feel angry about having to do something even though you chose to do it in the first place. You just say screw it and you eat processed foods. I complain about it. Your consistency's all over the place. Like those are all actions, right? And what are the results? The result is it feels really hard to do no sugar, no flour, and you probably have no results. And this is what I was saying in that your thinking is proven correct in your results. If I'm thinking no sugar, no flour is so hard to do around family, and then magic, all of a sudden, every time you go out with family, you're like, screw it, this is too hard, I'm just going to eat. And then you're like, why can't I stick to anything? This is what I mean by your thinking is proven in your results. Your thinking always shows up in your results. Your results you have right now are reflective of your thinking. Now, that's an unintentional model. Let's just say you weren't even really aware that your brain was like, oh, this is too hard to do with family. You just kept noticing every time you went to a family event, you got thrown off. And you're just like, I don't understand. I want to do this. Why can't I do that? And you're frustrated. That's an unintentional model. Then I want you to think about, as a contrast to that, the intentional model. So an intentional model is the model that is going to create the results you want. The key word being intentional. You run this on purpose. So let's use the same circumstance. No sugar, no flour. You have a thought about it that says, I can figure this out. Or they don't have to eat what I eat. Maybe that's my thought. It's just as simple as they don't have to eat what I eat. And your feeling is willing. Like, it's okay. I can figure this out. I'm willing to figure this out. That feeling, you can understand the feeling of willing in your body. And when I'm in that place of just feeling willing to figure it out, I'm going to ask friends for input on what works. I'm probably going to try some new recipes. I might do meal planning with my family. I might find easy swap options. So like my family can have this and it takes really no extra effort to swap this in and it just helps me eat better. I can just decide to eat different foods in my family. I can stop complaining about it. I can continue to look for solutions, and I likely don't quit when I'm feeling willing. And what is the result of that? If I'm willing to try new things, ask people for help, problem solve with my family, the chances are I'm probably going to be eating real food, right? So the thought is, I can figure this out. Result is, probably figuring out some way to eat real food around your family. You see how the thought shows up in the result. So that is your intentional model. So what we want to start doing is being like, okay, what is the result that you have right now that you don't love? Can you figure out what that unintentional model is? What are the actions that you're doing that are creating the result you don't want? What is the feeling that is driving it? What are the sentences that is creating that feeling? Now we're over here. What is the result you do want? Result. Then I want you to figure out, if I had that result, what actions would I be doing or not doing? What would I need to feel to take those actions? And lastly, if I needed to feel like that, what would have to be going on in my brain? Do you see you have the intentional model and the unintentional? It's very possible that the only skill that you might be missing is the fact that, oh my gosh, I just have to have a created intentional model when I find myself in the unintentional one. Or maybe the only change is I didn't even realize I was running an unintentional model. And I'm over here just trying to change my actions, and my brain stuck in the same pattern. And this can be a huge unlock of like, oh, I just need to figure out what the result is and work back up. Kate said this to a client yesterday, hating it is optional. Oh, isn't it? Pain is the thing, but the suffering is optional. I love that, Kate. So good. Okay, so now do we understand intentional and unintentional models? And we understand that the reason for inconsistency is usually because we don't recognize unintentional as running, and we don't have an intentional model that we have actually thought about to proactively create these results. So here's where we go wrong. It is something that I call jumping models. So follow this. The circumstance is neutral. It's no sugar, no flour. Your brain says, this is too hard to deal with family, and you feel frustrated. And then so your unintentional models running over here. So we do the thought and the feeling are staying in our unintentional model. And then we try to insert the actions from our intentional model. I'm just going to change what I'm doing. I'm going to ask friends for input what works. I'm going to try new recipes. I'm going to meal plan. But we've literally taken half of this model, the crappy thought, the crappy feeling, jumped over to the actions that should do the job. And they might work a little bit, but then you're not consistent. And you're like, oh, I don't get it. I know what I should be doing, but I can't figure out why I'm not doing it. The reason for that is you are mixing models. If you have actions that are inconsistent, it is because you have more than one model happening at once. You are running an unintentional model and you are running an intentional model. The only problem is you're sticking with your crappy thought and your crappy feeling and trying to do the actions that actually create the good result that you want. And you're like, I can't, and I'm always frustrated, but I'm doing the things, but it's not creating the results. We've been in this, yes? It's because we don't do the work on our brains. We just try to change the actions. So what we do is we get more podcasts, more books, more how-tos, how. We only ever change the action line. This is a huge, if we can get this, a huge unlock. So feeling frustrated will never cause you to eat healthy, ever. Feeling frustrated, you might change the model to something more motivated that might make you eat healthy, but you're never going to choose the life you want from frustrated or unmotivated or self-doubt, right? So if you find that you feel that way, but you're doing different things, you are likely just mixing these two models, right? They likely come from a different emotion and a different thought and a different feeling. And last thing I'm going to say here, there's one more type of model we're going to cover today. So we've covered unintentional, intentional, jumping models, and an aligned model. So we talked about alignment on the first day, kind of when everything feels like it's in flow. So an aligned model is when you have the C, T, F, A, R, and your circumstance and your results match. Here's what this looks like. At circumstances, no sugar, no flour. I can figure this out. Willing, you do all the actions, and the result is you don't eat sugar and flour. This is what we call goal achievement. You know, when you're like, I did it. I hit this many dollars in my business. I got my triple crowns on my Oura ring scores, whatever it is, it's only because your circumstance lined up with your result. This is an aligned model. It is the best feeling when it happens. And now we just need to start recognizing what is in the middle of this sandwich that is creating this aligned model. We don't do the work on our brains. We just try to change the actions. So what we do is we get more podcasts, more books, more how-tos, how. We only ever change the action line. This is a huge, if we can get this, a huge unlock. So feeling frustrated will never cause you to eat healthy, ever. Feeling frustrated, You might change the model to something more motivated that might make you eat healthy, but you're never going to choose the life you want from frustrated or unmotivated or self-doubt, right? So if you find that you feel that way, but you're doing different things, you are likely just mixing these two models, right? They likely come from a different emotion and a different thought and a different feeling. And last thing I'm going to say here, there's one more type of model we're going to cover today. So we've covered unintentional, intentional, jumping models, and an aligned model. So we talked about alignment on the first day, kind of when everything feels like it's in flow. So an aligned model is when you have the C, T, F, A, R, and your circumstance and your results match. Here's what this looks like. At circumstances, no sugar, no flour, I can figure this out. Willing, you do all the actions, and the result is you don't eat sugar and flour. This is what we call goal achievement. You know, when you're like, I did it. I hit this many dollars in my business. I got my triple crowns on my Oura Ring scores, whatever it is, it's only because your circumstance lined up with your result. This is an aligned model. It is the best feeling when it happens. And now we just need to start recognizing what is in the middle of this sandwich that is creating this aligned model.
Hey, before we go, did you know that I write a blog called The Freedom Diaries? It's basically documenting the story of how my husband and I reached financial independence at 33, and now we're traveling the world part-time with our 2 little girls. I write on travel and mindset and financial independence and money and all of that kind of stuff, and it's truly from the heart and just a completely joy and for fun project. If you want to check that out and subscribe or just read it for free, I'll leave a link to The Freedom Diaries in the description below.